This is like the Truman. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.
You're right.
This is our debut.
Yeah.
It took us a long time. My Lord.
This is the history of the Storino family, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the history. So, Edith, why don't you start us off?
Well, how can I start you off?
So, okay, well, how old? 8 years old? When
No,
you,
I was about 6.5
6
or
you were
7.
young when you came over.
And we left St. Mark, Italy, and we went to Naples. And Grandpa, my mother's daddy, came with us, and we rode in a buggy. I guess it was pulled by a horse or a donkey or something.
Isn't that what they called horse-drawn carriages? Is that what they were called?
Don't ask me what they were called. I don't know.
You're a child.
But then I guess we went to Naples and got on the boat, and we came 3rd class, which was at the bottom of the boat.
They call that third-class steering.
I don't know what it's called, but it was 3rd class. It took us 21 days to cross the ocean.
Wow.
And we landed on Islas Island, and we were going through the line. They asked a bunch of questions, who they were and what we were going to do and who sponsored us and all. And then we were tested if we were healthy, and they found we had lice. So they quarantined us for 1 whole week, not knowing whether they were going to let us enter the U.S. or whether they were going to send us back.
Wow.
But luckily, they let us come. And Daddy was in Seattle, Washington, which meant that we had to ride the train from New York, and we did. And I don't know how we ate, but there was a man that was delivering fruit, and I wanted a banana so bad. I begged for a banana, but Mother said we don't have money to buy a banana, so I never did get my banana.
Oh, no.
That was terrible.
And to this day, she has great cravings for bananas.
Oh, I still like bananas. So,
What a
I
sad
don't
story.
remember how long it took us from New York to Seattle. But we landed at King Depot in Seattle, and Daddy was there. And I hated him. So I wouldn't go forward. I wouldn't even walk toward him. I stood behind my mother's skirt. And she tried to tell me that was my dad. Well, that didn't mean anything to me. I had never seen that man.
So you'd never seen him?
Well, I don't.
You were just
I
a little
was
baby?
just 3 months old when he
Yeah.
left. But anyway, we went from there. He took us to my aunt's house, which is on 20th Avenue in Seattle. And can you fill in? We stayed there, I think maybe a year.
I don't remember being there because I was born on 23rd, so I had nothing at all to do with this
Yeah,
house.
but you weren't born until 23.
Yeah.
But then we stayed there, I don't know how long, and the house across the street, 901, was for sale. Daddy bought it and moved there, right across from my aunt's. Mm-hmm. And we must have stayed there several years. No, from there.
I keep saying I don't.
901, we stayed there a long time, Edith. I grew up there.
Yes.
But from my aunt's house,
Oh,
pardon
wow.
me, it's wrong. From my aunt's house, we went on 22nd Avenue and stayed there for a year or so. That's where you were born.
Hank was born before me, so he must have been born in Uncle's house on 20th.
No, I think we moved before he came along.
Because Hank was born before I was.
Yeah, sure.
But you were born on 23rd, weren't you?
And
I think so.
I think,
23rd Avenue, not 20th.
no, 23rd Avenue.
That's where I was born.
So we must have stayed there maybe 3 or 4 years before we bought the 901 house. I really,
You don't
That's
remember, and I
fine.
don't really remember either.
Well, 5 years later, after you were born, I was born in 901.
Yes.
And we were all delivered by midwives And in those days, you know, you were born and you didn't register with anybody. About 2 months later, you would say, well, I think we have to register this child someplace. So they went down to the courthouse. They can't remember what date I was born. They said, well, October 6th, 7th, 8th. Well, they weren't sure, so they put the 8th. And when I was baptized, they said October 6th, so I celebrate both. So all of us have 2 or 3 birthdays because in those days things were...
I don't think
you
we
know.
ever took the time to thank you for paving the way for the siblings. You paved the way, you and Sam, because you taught us how to speak English. When we went to school, we knew how to speak English.
We did.
And you know, I keep thinking, we never once thanked her for all, she had to go through all this hardship. She paved the way and made it easier for us.
Not only that, but she quit school to take care of the newborn, and she really wanted to lop his head off. She thought when she got finished with me, I was the last one, but no, Jim came along.
I felt like
And you know
pinching
why?
his head off.
Jim came along because the doctor told Mama, who was having back trouble,
Yeah.
she'd go to Tacoma.
I'm the one who caused the back trouble.
You caused the back trouble, and the doctor said, look, if you have one more child, it'll straighten your uterus or whatever, it straightened out, and it did.
It worked. But I was so mad because I was just got through changing her diapers and another one came and I could have pinched
Well,
his head.
isn't Jim? Didn't he think you were actually his mother?
Yeah.
For a time.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
went to a Japanese store which was close by where Mother shopped, and she carried this baby. And the Japanese man says, she looked at me and says, "Is that your baby?" And my hair just curled. I said, "That's my mother's baby."
Anyhow, when you went, I don't know whether you quit school when you were a sophomore, senior, whenever, but to take the responsibility of helping to support a family at your young age, I have to admire you for your courage and your selflessness.
Boy, say that
Oh,
again.
well, then depression came along.
And Papa was laid off, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And so you decided, what were you doing to support the family?
Well, the first thing I was doing, the first job I ever had, was across town picking chickens.
Picking
You had to pick them clean. Otherwise, you were called back if there was a pin feather or a feather on the chicken. You had to, and it was piecework, and it was 2 cents per chicken.
I thought it was 26 cents.
Oh,
it
Lord.
was
2
2
cents
cents
per
per chicken.
Wow.
Be sure you get that.
It was about, roughly guessing, at least 5 to 6 miles from where we lived. And being we didn't have a dime to pay on the streetcar, we walked. My girlfriend Rose Curdy and I walked. And sometimes we'd go, it was on the
Western Avenue?
Western Avenue, I don't know the name of the place. And we'd walk and then go up the stairs and see. And a lot of the times we walked, there was no chickens, so we didn't even earn 2 cents. We had to walk back.
You wore out your shoes for nothing.
So then one day, we were quite busy. Rose and I had a bright idea. Because you had to go in line when you picked your chickens, and you have to wait for the chicken, and they had to kill them, they had to scald them, then they hung them up by their feet, and everybody got 1 chicken, and you were in line. It was so we decided if we brought our brothers, which they were around 10 years old, I don't remember exactly, so I brought Hank, and Curdy brought Charlie.
10 years old.
And they were supposed to stand in line and get our chickens while we picked them. Well, the second day we brought them, they said, "That's a no-no. You cannot bring them. You have to stand in line yourself. Don't bring your brothers anymore." So I wish Hank was here to tell that story. He tells it so funny.
So what did you do, send the boys home, or did you have to
Well,
walk them?
No, we didn't send them home. They were too young. They had to wait until we were through.
Oh my
But
God.
we never worked a whole day. We might have got 5 or 6 chickens, which would be, if we got 5 chickens, we made a dime.
Oh my.
If we got 10 chickens, we made 20 cents.
Oh, you said 2 cents a chicken.
2 cents a chicken.
Yeah. Okay.
That's hard to believe. 2 cents a chicken.
And then you had to walk at least 4 to 6 miles to get there.
How many people were there? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Then you needed either galoshes or boots, because when you picked the chickens, they were wet and the blood was dripping from their head.
Ew.
And it was at least 2 inches
Of
of
water?
water and feathers and whatever.
So you got your feet
So,
wet.
so you needed either boots or galoshes. So, well, it's good.
Wow, that's a big,
I don't know how
furry,
many
wet
years.
story.
But all the money I made went to the folks because it was during Depression and they needed it. Then Rose and I, we decided there was Black Bear Factory down in Rainier Valley. And we decided we'd go apply for a job, which we did. And believe it or not, about a week later, they hired us. And we thought we were in heaven. It was $14.50 per week.
Wow.
But it was piecework, and you had to work as fast as you
$14.
could to make a certain amount. If you didn't make it, you didn't get it.
You didn't get $14.50?
That's right.
What did you get? Just what you
Well,
did?
whatever
you
made.
produce.
Oh.
And my job was to ham jeans. I had a special power machine, and if you didn't be careful, it'd sew your fingers too. So I do like this, and I do it real fast, and I always done my share. I got $14.50 a week.
So you made the maximum.
Wow.
Yeah, and Daddy was out of work, so that went for the family.
And so then again, I have to. How long was Papa out of work?
Well, Daddy was out of work, and then they had the
WPA?
WPA. He went to work for that, and we made it.
WP.
And I think, was it Hank that had the paper route?
Yeah.
This is what I was told, and I don't remember Hank and his paper route, but
I do.
But
Yeah,
I
cousin
even
Mary,
saw his dog.
cousin
What?
Mary said you should all be so grateful that Hank get up 3 or 4 in the morning,
Yeah.
and his paper route in the dark he would go, and I don't remember how far he had to walk to complete his paper route.
Yeah, he went all the way to Mount Baker, and then he had a dog that waited for him every morning and walked the rest of the route with him.
It wasn't his dog?
No.
No.
Oh,
And then
that's
one
sad.
day, he was making the route, the dog had made him, and he'd walk the rest of the way to where we lived, and the dog had walked back by himself. But one day he went by there and the dog was tied. He said, "You should have seen that dog." He just
He barked and
barked and barked and pulled on his chain.
But the thing Mary told us, don't you remember when he bought us each a gift? A Christmas gift with his money that he made selling papers. And I said, I don't even remember,
remember that
Do you
either.
remember, Dorothy?
No.
Well, not only us, but he bought Mary and Jean, his cousin, a gift too.
Well, that's why she remembered.
I don't remember.
I don't remember that.
Well, I should have remembered it because, you know, he was only 2 years older than I. And so if he had a paper route, he must have been
He's
what?
only 2 years older than you?
Hank was born in 1921. I was born in 23.
Oh, okay.
And so Hank, if you have a paper route, you probably have to be 13 or 14 or whatever.
And he said he built himself a box with a wheel or 2 wheels.
They
and
called
that's-
those scooters, didn't they?
I don't
What did they
know.
call those? Bob?
Wagons.
They made them out of an apple box.
You used to call them scooters.
I think they
Scooters?
were called scooters.
Out of a skate. They took a skate
Yeah,
in half.
yeah,
Yeah.
they took a skate
One
in half
skate
and
and then
put,
put the two wheels and made
Right.
yeah,
Double forward.
because the papers were too heavy for him to carry. I don't know.
But
how
did
many
he make
had.
that his own scooter then?
Yeah, he made his own scooter.
Yeah.
Or maybe Daddy helped him. I don't know, but he made it. So that
any-
was our life. Now,
Anyhow, he was our brother who eventually became a P-38 pilot in the South Pacific. And I remember when he was going overseas and he looked at us and he said, I'm going over there to fly a pursuit plane. He said, and I'm going to be shooting or bombing or whatever. And he said, I'm not really mad at anybody.
he
He
didn't
said,
want to
I'm
kill
not
him.
mad. And don't forget to fly low and slow. And he said, my dear Mom, that's the worst advice you could have given me.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Of course, he did experience a bad experience over there when he was,
Shot down.
actually, he ran out of gas before he got back to his home base. And then when I think he knew he had to parachute out. And
This
he
is
said,
the horrible thing. They had never taught them how.
he said in all of his training, which was a very speedy,
Uh-huh.
probably a very short training, but the only thing they taught him was how to fly the plane and bomb.
Not how to bail out.
And he said he knew he had to bail out. He was tangled up. He was how many thousand feet up in the air, and his parachute was that he had his gear, his gun, he had a knife. He said the thing he knew he had to do was slow down the plane, and he did that. Then he said he had to crawl to get out of that plane, and he
Right.
knew he had to clear the plane or get killed.
Yeah, right.
And he went on and on. He told us how the whole thing was a pretty scary, frightening,
Well,
the experience. I guess he finally cleared the plane and he opened the chute, but it took him 3 times to open the chute, and he finally got that open.
and then he hit his nose.
Yeah, he had a bloody nose, and when he was coming down, he noticed this beautiful blue lagoon. There were 3 natives in a canoe, and he said, gosh, I sure hope they like me.
And they did. They treated him like a king, didn't they?
They did. Anyhow, he
But
was
He found out there were Japanese on the island, and I said, well, why didn't the Japanese capture you right away? And he said, they knew I wasn't going anywhere, so why hurry? But he was offered a tent, and he was offered all kinds of food, and then there was a young boy, about 10,
yes.
who befriended him and just gave him everything, and one day
Watched out for him.
watched out, and
Yeah.
the reason Hank found out there were Japanese on the island was he was offered a cigarette, and it was a Japanese cigarette, so he knew then. And it was, I think, on the 2nd or 3rd day, he saw one of his own planes going by, and he flashed them with a mirror, and they gave him the signal that they would be back to pick him up. And that's how he was rescued. And this boy, didn't the boy just really cry, and he said, take me with you?
The boy thought that Hank, when he was going to be rescued, would take him with him.
Yeah.
And he said, of course he couldn't take him with him. But anyhow, it was what? How many years later he's
40 years later.
At least 40 or 50.
40 years later, Hank, our brother, wrote to this boy. Of course, the boy was married and had kids, and he told Hank, says, please come to see us sometimes.
He said after you left, they captured him, they imprisoned him, and they were going to execute him
Because the war was over.
because he had saved an American,
Right.
or he helped an American pilot.
Yeah. But the war was over, and they didn't do anything to him. They said,
No, Edith will be there.
Yeah, I really think you ought to consider just coming up to my place and staying overnight on New Year's Eve.
oh,
And then you can have the guest room. By that time, I'll have all the Christmas stuff out of the guest room.
oh.
The bed is ready.
You're
Towels.
gonna get through doing.
What? And then we can just have breakfast down there and then come up and cook.
We have to eat Otherwise, we get real cranky.
Oh, cranky.
And so now that we've got a full belly, we can be pleasant. And you know, when Bob asked me a question, I answered him, and I don't think I'm mad. He said, "Your attitude's not good." He said, "You always sound like you're kind of mad." So I thought, boy, do I ever have to watch that.
That's just the way we come off. I've been told that too.
We just come off like we're mad, and
Well,
we're not really mad.
We're very definite and we're very sure, and we're like this, and people say, "How come you're so snappy?" Well, I didn't think I was snappy, you know. I just am sure of myself, and that's good.
Mother used to be like that.
Mother was like that, and we all take after her. It's a good trait to have.
Helen O'Donnell said, "Your mom never says maybe. You ask a question, it's either a definite yes or a definite no. There's no in between." And I thought,
Oh,
yeah, I kind of think
We're
like
all
that.
three that way, but I think Brother Jim's that way, Sam's that way,
And Hank too.
and see, we come by it
Really?
naturally. We sound like we're mad, but we're really not. I can remember when, was it your husbands that used to come to the house before you were married, and they'd say, "Why are you always arguing? You're just always arguing all the time."
Bob says that too all the
We're
time.
not arguing.
He
That's our
says too
normal
much.
tone of voice.
The other day he said, "Too much argument, I'm going to the basement."
So we chase him away, don't
Yeah,
we?
we do. We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's.
But I remember when we started to date,
Mhm.
this is during, you know, World War II days, and
Gosh,
I'd come
that's such a
home and
long
my
time
mom
ago.
would say, "Is he Italian?" First she'd say, "Is he Italian?" And he's a Catholic.
Oh yeah.
That was very, very important
You
to
didn't
her.
care if you married an Italian? I never wanted to marry an
I
Italian.
said no, no.
None of us did.
Yeah, none of us did marry an Italian. We either married like, well,
Norwegians, Swedes,
are those the Anglo-Saxons?
I guess.
And what do you think? My 96-year-old neighbor said, "I'd like to come back in 50 years from now because I think this nation will be all one color, one race." And I remember Jeff's father saying,
What color are we? going to-
we should number the blondest blue-eyed, number 1, and all the way you go up, and the olive-skinned ones are number 5, which would be me, and the darkest Negro would be number 10. He said a number 1 would have to marry a 10, a number 2 would have to marry an 8, or 9. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, because the dark predominates.
But anyhow, I said to Bonnie, "I don't believe it will happen in 50 years. I said, I think in 50 years from now, there's still going to be blondes and blue eyes. I think we'll be a little more mixed, you know, mixed marriages." But what do you think? What do you think?
I
Why
never
should
thought
it?
of it.
Why should it change?
Well, because people are
Intermarrying?
Yeah, colored and Japanese and Chinese.
She just
and-
made
Then we're going to all be darker, because if
no,
we intermarry with
we
the
have
blonde-
we have to be 5. He said 5 was the, so
5
we'll all
was
be
what?
5.
What's 5?
It's a mixture.
Olive skin. This was his thinking, Dorothy, and I thought I've never heard anyone.
I just know that when, like you take for instance Mama and Papa, when they made it, all the children were what? Were dark and brown-eyed. Papa was light and blue-eyed. It's the
Daddy
Dark.
was blue-eyed.
Yes, he was.
Where
you
were
mean
you?
you just found that out?
He was
I know he
light
had curly hair.
and blue-eyed.
Not
Mama was-
curly,
yeah,
wavy
but
hair.
Papa was.
the dark predominates.
We know that.
Well, then what's your problem?
I
So
don't have
anyhow,
a problem with
that's
it.
kind
Kind
of
of an interesting concept. I don't think it's going to work because I don't believe the blue eyes.
I don't think we know exactly. I'm not smart enough to figure that
I'm
one
not
out.
wise enough to know what the outcome's going to be.
No, I'm not either.
But it's kind of fun to think about it.
I just think maybe in 50 years we might have a woman president,
Oh, I'm with
and
you.
she will be a lot better at it than any so far.
You bet. My father, being that he had 6 children, a common laborer, he had to have extra jobs. So he took on this job as a landscaper for J.D. Ross, who was the superintendent of, wasn't it the city light he did?
Yeah.
Or what?
Yeah, it was a city light of Seattle.
Seattle. So
And
anyhow,
he was way up there. He was a well-to-do fella, and he lived in Mount Baker. No,
yes,
toward, yeah, is that what you call Mount Baker, near Lake Washington?
that's exactly where he lived. But
Oh,
anyhow,
Just
my
make it up,
father,
even though it's not true. Make it up.
my
No,
father
that's true.
was a landscaper on the weekends because he held a job eventually at Boeing's, and he worked at Boeing's for, I don't know, 25 or more years. But he was up there landscaping Mr. J.D. Ross's yard. He found this mulberry tree, and he recognized it because in Italy, the silkworm was one of their primary crops. And so he told J.D. Ross, this is a mulberry tree, and this is what we used to feed our silkworms in the old country. So J.D. Ross was interested, and he said, is there any way we can get the silkworm eggs? I guess that's what are they called?
And they're the silkworm.
Anyhow, he said, I can get them from a relative in Italy. So he sent away for the silkworm. And when inside of a month, I guess, I don't remember when they came,
Yeah, they came.
but when they came through the mail, they had already hatched. So my dad said, we need mulberry leaves, but we don't have them in this part of the country because it was too early and the leaves hadn't formed yet.
Well,
So-
Ross had a few, but he didn't have enough to feed all those silkworms. So Ross says, well, I can,
It was in the winter time and the leaves weren't really there.
well, small leaves were there.
So they had to, he knew someone in California that could get these mulberry leaves, so they had a shipment come in. It was a pretty good, and so they did that either for how many weeks?
I don't remember how long it takes.
But anyhow, so they set up the silkworm, and like Edith said, they had to have all these, we had to devote one bedroom to the silkworm, which meant that the three of us, where would we sleep in?
Probably in the basement with the cat.
And
Well, we
so,
didn't have that many rooms. The boys
That's
had one
true.
room, and
That's
the mom and pop had another room. There were
I
three
don't know
bedrooms.
where
I don't
we
know.
slept.
I think we probably
But
slept.
when the
around.
silkworms are ready to spin their cocoon, you need something like a big branch of a tree or what do you call those?
some kind of boughs, we had
Yeah,
all
because
kinds.
they have to crawl up there and they weave around like a spider
Yeah.
does, and then they spin their cocoon. I don't know how long it takes. Do you remember how long it took to spin their cocoon?
Couple hours maybe.
No, it
probably
takes
takes
days.
weeks.
I don't know how long it takes.
From the,
We don't know.
hey, listen,
We should
shut
look
this
it up.
off because we're going to have to look it up in the encyclopedia.
I'll look
I
it up.
think it takes
Silkworm.
for the silkworm to mature from this little teeny, a quarter of an inch
Oh, what do I look
white
it up
worm,
for?
the
Silk?
thickness of your strand of hair. Anyhow, it took like 30 days. And
30
I've read
days?
about that and now I have forgotten, but it's like
30 days to do a cocoon?
No,
30 days to
for-
mature.
Oh, mature.
From the egg to the, what do you call that?
I don't know. Cocoon?
No, before the cocoon, the worm. It's a worm about this
Yeah.
big. When it's,
You know, when it's ready to go into a spin,
yeah, it's about
Sex
this big.
ratio.
the worm
Isn't that
is about the
interesting?
size of a small finger. It
Real
turns
fat.
gold and it's shiny. And my mother knew it's time.
Yeah.
So, we got all excited and I guess,
Oh
We got
gosh,
the
our
branches or the whatever it is that you put together so they can crawl on there.
and so we watched them spin and at least then when they start to spin, you don't hear all this crunch, crunch, crunch when they're eating because they made a lot of noise when they're eating. All those worms.
I
were-
remember that now. I had forgotten about all the noise they used to make.
How come you forgot?
Well, there's many little things that have taken place since then to now, isn't there?
What's that? What is your question?
Turn off that machine.
Yeah, I know it. He wants to. Oh, here it is. Here it is. The silkworm.
Oh, then it's a butterfly.
And the reason why, once they spin that cocoon, you have to either bake them in the oven at 300, 350 or whatever, or you have to dump them in scalding hot water so that
Wild
they,
silkworms.
otherwise they form into a moth
And they
They-
eat out of the cocoon, and the cocoon has a hole in it, and they come out.
And you see the strands, you have to keep the strands.
Oh, there's the sheriff.
Yeah.
What does he want?
Who knows?
Oh,
Is he here?
no, he was going.
Anyhow, this is what they, I guess in the old country, I don't remember my mom talking about this, but apparently they would sell
There's
their
a worm.
cocoon.
Yeah, there's
Two.
a worm.
And here's the
Here's
worm.
the eggs, the worm, the cocoon, but I'm trying to figure out
How long it
how
takes.
long it takes.
It
The
says right
worm-
there if you'll read it.
Well,
She
Well,
can't
I'm
read.
not a fast reader. I'm not one of those who took Evelyn Wood's course.
How come?
She just didn't. She didn't have time.
Well, I thought we were going to go for a ride.
Well, we haven't got through with the cocoons yet.
So you just sold the cocoons. You didn't actually have to.
Well, my mom did. You
Oh,
know, when
no,
I was
no.
I was in high school. No, I was in grade school. So I went ahead and I had the cocoon and I had all this diagram and I looked
Oh,
at
here it is.
You
Now
know
the
what?
silkworm is full grown and is ready to spin its cocoon.
how long did it take.
One day it stops eating and raises its head, swaying backward and forward in search of a twig on which to fasten
See,
its
they need
cocoon.
a twig.
The silk farmer rushes to bring in a rack of tiny cells to the silkworm. Each worm begins 2 glands in as a spray.
How
Just
long
a
did it
minute,
take
then
for it to
begins
mature?
line up.
I'll have to look it up.
As the spray
We should have
doesn't
studied
say.
this before Jeff
I've
came.
read that several
Each
times, but I
worm
forgot.
begins to spin. 2 strands as a spray. The first worm spins the outer covering or fluff. Then it begins to wind the long continuous around its body. As the worm spins on, it shrinks smaller and smaller,
Yeah.
finally hidden from view.
The worm gets real fat, and as it spins, it uses its body to, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Pretty soon, it's just like a little tiny stick.
It doesn't
And-
say how long.
Yes, it does. I've read it.
in the
How
cocoon.
long? Then you tell.
Well,
I
maybe
told
if you
ya.
give it to her, she knows where it is. Take it.
I have to go in the kitchen and read it.
Oh, she's left. Here she comes.
What?
It says when they start to spin, you have to keep the house very, very quiet because loud noises will disturb their spinning and they'll quit.
Yeah. Oh, did we know that?
I don't think so.
I don't think we knew that.
I
But it
don't think
doesn't
they
say
spin
how
very
long,
good because
Ann.
Italian
5
families
weeks.
are so loud and noisy.
Is that what you found in there?
It says the eggs hatch out into tiny white worms from an eighth to a quarter of an inch long and no thicker than a hair. Now the silk farmer's real work begins. The newborn worms are greedy eaters. I remember
Yeah.
that.
They used to
eat
make
a
a lot of
lot.
noise.
And the farmer's whole family's kept busy bringing in mulberry leaves for the worms to feed. The whole house is filled with the sound of crunching.
Yeah, I remember.
You know what? We remember crunching leaves.
Yeah, we do remember.
The worms eat steadily for the next 5 weeks. During this time, the worms eat their own weight in leaves every single day.
Are they spinning at the same
No,
time?
no,
No,
they're
this
just
is when-
eating.
See,
They
this is
haven't
when they
developed
become
yet.
a worm.
It takes them 5 weeks from the time they hatch to be able to spin the cocoon.
Okay, did you find out how long it takes them to spin a cocoon?
They grow so fast that they shed their skins about 4 times.
Ooh.
At the end of the 5 weeks, they're about 3 inches long and nearly half an inch thick. I remember they were thick and golden color and shiny. Remember that?
Yeah, and they wiggle their head.
Yeah.
They were looking for a place.
At the end of the weeks,
Uh-huh.
okay, the body is divided into 12 sections.
12.
1, 2, 3,
Yeah, yeah,
5,
there it
6,
is.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12
It is
sections.
supposed,
It's like an accordion. They can wiggle.
it is supported by 3 pairs of what is that? What's that word? You can't see it either.
What?
True legs and has
What are you talking about?
5 pairs of hooked leg-like
Leg-like
bits
bits
of
of-
flesh. Now the silkworm is full grown and is ready to spin its cocoon. One day it stops eating and raises its head, swaying back and forth. I remember that.
They're looking for a place.
They're searching for a twig on which to fasten their cocoon. The silk farmer rushes to bring in a rack of tiny cells to the silkworms. He places each worm in a cell. Well, we didn't do that. Each worm begins to spin. 2 glands in the blah blah blah. First, the worm spins the outer covering.
Yeah.
Then it begins to wind the long, continuous thread of silk around and around its body. As the worm spins it on, it shrinks smaller and smaller,
Yeah.
and is finally hidden from view.
How long?
If the cocoon is left undisturbed, the worm will turn into a tiny moth
But we
Or
don't
pupa.
want that.
So you have to bake them or
and
cook
bore
'em.
its way out of its silk covering. It does this in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's 2 or 3
Well,
weeks.
see, when it makes a hole, then it damages the.
Well, of course,
thread.
it's gone through, it's cut through those. Yes,
So-
That's why we have to kill them.
that's why you have to bake them or put them in boiling hot water.
I remember Mama baking them
I remember that too.
I don't really.
on tin tray.
Wasn't that interesting that anyhow, I made a report and I got an A+.
Did you make a report on this? What grade
when I
were
was
you
in school? Yes.
What
Well, no wonder you remember everything.
I was in grade school. I don't remember what grade, probably
6th, 7th?
6th, 7th, 8th. I don't know.
Okay, so you were in 6th, 7th. I was probably in 2nd or 1st.
Yeah.
Well, no wonder you've been studying up on it and
Yeah,
writing
you
programs.
wrote a whole project.
I did that 50 years
Oh,
ago.
that's okay, but you did it.
Yeah, you bet I did. And I took a sample, I took the silkworm with me.
Boy, no wonder you got an A+.
You bet. It was a good report. I should have
Yeah.
kept it.
Yeah.
Are we going to go now?
Jeff is through. We're ready.
I'm ready.
Had enough of this?
You bet.
Are we going to eat some more or are we going to go for a ride?
I'm going to go for a ride and then come back and have pie.
Oh,
Pie?
Pie and Tina, do you like tea or anything?
Anything's okay.
Okay.
tea.
That's what we'll do.